Hello, I'm Dustin Isom, and this is my Class 2 assessment presentation where I'll be walking you through the three-stage process we've been working through over the past month or so. These stages consisted of running validation cycle interviews, mapping out risky assumptions, and synthesizing data to validate assumptions and move forward in the most confidentially validated direction. This all starts with cycle 2, which is the first problem space that I explored in this class. With that, we'll start with who I talked to on the next slide. So this slide shows who I spoke with during cycle 2 of validation. The goal of this cycle was to make sure I was talking to people who actually experienced the problem I'm trying to solve, not just people who owns plants casually. As you can see, the customer profile was people aged 28 to 45, which included plant group enthusiasts, creative professionals, healthcare workers, and young professionals. What connected them wasn't their job, but how plants fit into their lifestyle. This slide also breaks down the inclusive traits, exclusive traits, and triggers I identified in cycle 2. I'm going to explain a bit about each of these because they helped sharpen my assumptions. Inclusive traits are the characteristics shared by people who clearly felt the problem. These included owning multiple indoor plants, caring about how their space looks and feels, updating decor seasonally and emotionally, and already spending money on pot, stands, or decor accessories. Many also expressed frustration with the effort and mess of repotting. On the other hand, I also identified exclusive traits. These were people who were ultra price sensitive, people who enjoy repotting as a hobby or ritual, and minimalist users who see plants as purely functional. Even though some of these people like plants, they don't experience the same pain I'm solving for. And finally, the triggers listed at the bottom of the slide are important. These include preparing for holidays, seasonal refreshes, visual fatigue, or wanting to upgrade a pot without the hassle. This helped me realize the problem is often triggered by moments, not constant frustration. So this slide shows the three minimal validation slides I tested during cycle 2. The purpose here was not to pitch a final product, but to test different angles of the same idea and see which ones resonated emotionally. The first validation slide focused on aesthetic refresh, the idea that people want their plants to look better without changing the plant itself. This tested whether visual improvement alone was compelling. And the second slide focused on being cost effective and decor conscious, positioning the idea as an alternative to buying new pots or making bigger home decor purchases. And the third slide focused on difficulty and mess of changing pots, specifically calling out repotting as time consuming, dirty, and something people often avoid. Showing these three angles helped me understand not just if people liked the idea, but why they liked it. Across interviews, people reacted most strongly to messaging around avoiding mess and effort, which informed how I framed the value proposition moving forward. And this is a snip of my heat map data, which summarizes and analyzes the heat from cycle 2. The purpose of the heat map was to synthesize interview data and look for patterns in emotional language and repeated reactions. The strongest signals shown here were ease of use without mess, premium designs that make standard pots look better, quick seasonal or holiday themes, and avoiding repotting altogether. Weaker or more uncertain areas included assumptions about universal fit and long-term permanent use. This slide ultimately helped me clearly separate what was strongly validated versus what still needed testing, which is a key part of the assessment requirements. And we'll look a bit closer at these on the following slide. So now we're looking at how I mapped customer pain points by intensity, using a visual layout to separate what people feel most strongly about versus what they tolerate or deprioritize. Starting with the top left quadrant, these represent the highest intensity pain points. These are issues that came up frequently and were expressed with emotional language during interviews. The strongest examples here are the mess and effort of repotting, the hassle of changing pots, and the frustration of wanting a cleaner or more intentional look without disrupting the plant itself. These pain points matter because they create real avoidance behavior. People talked about delaying repotting, living with pots they don't like, or settling for a look that feels off because the effort feels too high. This quadrant is full of urgency. In contrast, the bottom right quadrant represents low intensity pain points. These are things people mention but without strong emotion or urgency. Examples include universal fit across every possible pot size or long-term permanence. These were acknowledged, but they didn't drive behavior or frustration. The key takeaway from this slide is prioritization. The top left quadrant tells me what actually motivates action, while the bottom right quadrant highlights considerations that can be optimized later, but shouldn't drive my core value proposition. This analysis really helped me focus the solution on reducing friction and mess during, rather than trying to solve every possible plant-related issue at once. Now on to cycle 3, where I had a bit of a different focus in my minimal validation slides, but an identical who I talked to, as I did not shift my niche. Like I said, the cycle continued with the same core customer profile. I did this intentionally so I could validate whether insights from cycle 2 held up when I went deeper. Again, the audience included plant enthusiasts, creative professionals, healthcare workers, and young professionals between 28 and 45 who use plants for aesthetic and emotional reasons. The focus in cycle 3 shifted from asking, is this a problem, to asking, when does this problem actually matter and why? This helped me validate not just interest, but motivation and timing. This slide shows the 3 refined validation angles I tested in cycle 3. The first focused on wanting a clean, fresh look. The second focused on refreshing style without adding decor clutter. And the third focused on thoughtfulness and personalization, especially in gifting or seasonal use. An interesting thing I learned here was that people didn't want more stuff. They wanted intentional upgrades. Several interviewees talked about feeling overwhelmed by decor and appreciated ideas that simplified or edited their space. This was an important refinement from cycle 2 and helped clarify how the solution should be positioned. Now to my heat map data from cycle 3. My goal here was to refine what I learned in cycle 2 and see which themes actually strengthened, weakened, or stayed neutral when I went deeper with customers. One important clarification from this cycle is that not all themes were equally strong, and that's reflected in how they appear on the heat map. The strongest signals were around cost-efficient refreshes, seasonal or holiday versatility, and the ability to create a clean, intentional look. Customers consistently reacted positively to the idea of changing the look of their space without buying new pots or repotting in general. Language around flexibility, reversibility, and ease showed up much more strongly than anything related to transforming or upgrading the plant itself. It's also important to note what did not come through as strongly. While elevating basic nursery plants was mentioned, it did not carry the same emotional intensity or consistency as the other themes, which pretty much told me it should not be a core driver of the value proposition. Overall, this slide helped me narrow the solution even further away from plant transformation and toward temporary, low-effort aesthetic refreshes that fit into people's real lives and decision-making patterns. Now, onto my pain point intensity quadrant for cycle 3. Similarly to the other one we saw, starting with the top left quadrant, these represent the highest intensity pain points from cycle 3. These are the issues that came up consistently and were expressed with emotional language. The strongest themes here were wanting a cost-efficient way to refresh the look of their space and wanting seasonal or situational updates without effort. These pain points were often tied to specific moments, hosting guests, seasonal changes, or feeling visual fatigue. Customers reacted most strongly to the idea of quickly improving how their space looks without having to repot, clean up soil, or invest in new decor. In contrast, the bottom right quadrant represents low intensity pain points. These are things customers mention, but without urgency or frustration. Examples here include no permanent decor commitment and material or surface features like wipeability. While these features were appreciated, they were not decision drivers. Customers saw them as nice to have, not reasons they would actively seek out or purchase a solution. The key takeaway from this slide is prioritization. Cycle 3 helped confirm that visual refresh and situational flexibility drive behavior, while reversibility and permanence concerns play a supporting role. This distinction helped me avoid focusing on features that don't actually motivate action and reinforce where to focus the core value proposition versus what should remain secondary benefits. Now, after synthesizing my latest insights, I was able to come up with a value proposition statement or value proposition statements that best describes my top 2 hunches around my problem, audience, and solution, which we'll look at in the next 2 slides. My preferred value proposition statement is, we help style-conscious plant owners instantly refresh the look of their indoor plants with a mess-free, shrink-fit, decorative skirt without repotting or replacing their pots. So I rated customer confidence here as an 8 because this audience is reachable, clearly identifiable, and already spending money to solve this problem in inefficient ways. Problem confidence is 8.5 because emotional frustration was repeatedly validated through interviews and heat map analysis. Solution confidence is a little bit lower at 7.5. While the differentiation is clear and execution is simple, there are still uncertainties around manufacturing scale and repeat purchase behavior. Overall, this value proposition best balances consistency, emotional pull, and differentiation. This slide shows my second best value proposition. We help plant lovers elevate their home decor for the special moments with an easy to apply decorative plant skirt that instantly upgrades any pot. Customer confidence here is slightly lower at 7 because this audience is broader and urgency is more situational. Problem confidence remains strong at 7.5 since the frustration is real but context dependent. And solution confidence is higher at 8 because the product strengths, the instant visual upgrade and low commitment, align extremely well with the moment-based use cases. So this is not necessarily a weak alternative, but a more focused option depending on my go-to-market strategy. Now shifting gears to my risky assumptions. This slide outlines the key risky assumptions associated with my value proposition and highlights which ones pose the greatest risk at this stage. Each assumption was scored based on uncertainty and importance, with higher scores indicating greater overall risk. The most important thing to call out on this slide is that the highest risk assumption is scored at 80, making it the most critical area to validate next. This assumption relates to my ability to manufacture the product cost effectively and at scale while maintaining quality and margins. I scored this assumption high not because it's unsolvable, but because it's both highly important to the business and still uncertain. If I can't produce this affordably and consistently, the value proposition breaks down regardless of customer interest. Other assumptions on this slide, though, such as customer interest, emotional relevance of the problem, and willingness to use the solution in specific moments, scored lower. That's because these have been partially validated through customer discovery interviews and heat map analysis. At this stage, the biggest unknown is operational feasibility, not whether the problem exists. This clarity helps guide me or my next steps. Rather than continuing to revalidate the problem, my focus moving forward should be on testing manufacturing options, cost structures, and scalability to reduce the highest risk assumption. Now for some quick reflection on the need to pivot. This pretty much just stops you and has you pause and ask yourself if you need to pivot. And I don't believe I need to pivot. I've been pretty consistent with being able to reach potential customers to conduct interviews and have stayed on track each week. Being that I have a reachable audience, I'll continue down this path to advance the constant cycle into my next classes. Thank you very much.